for anyone that could use a break. A Psalm for the Wild Built is, not to be hyperbolic, but a genuinely life-saving book. It takes place in the post-apocalyptic world, wherein humanity has found a way to rebuild. They refer to this big shift as the transition. There is a time, the time that I believe we're ultimately living in right now, not so fondly referred to as the factory age. While history does not remember the factory age kindly, we can't divorce robots from their point of origin. We built constructs that could build other constructs, wherein manufactured robotic labor has taken over all production and were originally intended as a supplement to the human workforce, not as the full replacement they became, and no human hands have been put to work, despite the fact that they need it. This results in a capitalist collapse. And just when humanity seems to be on the brink of expulsion or extinction, we had bastardized constructs to the point that it was killing us. All the robots wake up. Simply put, Call took our toys away. They develop a sentience or a consciousness. If you ask 6 different monks the question of which godly domain robot consciousness belongs to, you'll get 7 different answers. We don't exactly know what happens during that time, but it results in humanity offering those robots equal citizenship as humans. They politely decline. We thank you for not keeping us here against our will, and we mean no disrespect to your offer, but it is our wish to leave your cities entirely, so that we may observe that which has no design, the untouched wilderness. And thus, the earth, or what is fondly regarded as the moon that these humans live on, the land that is left over is divided into a 50-50 split. 50% of the land reserved for humanity, and 50% reserved for all else. Our protagonist, our narrator, notes that, obviously, this seems an unfair balance. 50% of the land designated to just one species, but our narrator recognizes that getting humanity to agree to any limit whatsoever is a win in itself. So that's where we open. In a post-capitalist utopian society wherein humans' relationship with technology has drastically evolved. Chapter 1 is called A Change in Vocation. It opens with Sibling Dex, they, them. Sometimes, a person reaches a point in their life when it becomes absolutely essential to get the fuck out of the city. We learn that the city has become a beautiful place, a thriving place, and that humanity has evolved into a species that helps one another really without any sort of exchange of payment, simply because humanity has matured enough, evolved enough to recognize that the prosperity of your neighbor impacts one. We learn that the city smells good, too. Each inhaled breath perfumed with cooking spice, fresh nectar, laundry drying in the pristine air. The city was a healthy place, a thriving place, a never-ending harmony of making, doing, growing, trying, laughing, running, and living. And Sibling Dex was so tired of it. Sibling Dex wants to change their vocation. They've spent the majority of their life tending the Meadow Den Monastery's rooftop garden. They're a gardener. They tend to plants. While they work closely and are associated with this tamed wilderness, they become obsessed with the idea of the cricket's song. They have not heard a cricket. And while there are bugs in the city that do make various noises, none of them chirp. None of them sing. And so Sibling Dex decides to do something completely different. They tell their monastery that they will be changing their vocation. They're going to go to the villages to do tea service. Sister Mara, who'd been in the middle of slathering a golden piece of toast with as much jam as it could structurally support, held her spoon still and blinked. That's rather sudden. For you, Dex said. Not for me. And because Sister Mara's duties are to oversee and not to dictate, Sibling Dex is cleared. They have to find somebody to take over their duties, but ultimately the monastery is going to take care of them. They are supplied with their wagon, which will serve as their home that they live in and pull on their ox bike from village to village. A tea monk is ultimately a sort of therapist that travels from town to town. They show up and create a space of comfort and warmth and healing for the people of each village. Sibling Dex is offered an apprenticeship, a student study of a sort, an internship, so to speak, but Sibling Dex has read a bunch of books and wants to learn simply by trying. Learning by doing is regarded as an equally valid path in this universe. I want to self-teach. The monastery throws Sibling Dex a goodbye party. There are hugs and tears and too much wine, as the occasion demands. And as that party is going on, and as Sibling Dex is packing up their things and saying goodbye to the only adult life they've ever known, they wonder if they're making a mistake. Crickets, they think, and the protest vanishes. With that, they walked out of Meadow Den. They think about how many times they've left this space. There was a gravity to leaving a place for good, a deep sense of seismic change. Dex turned, bag over their back. They looked up at the mural of the child god, Alale, their god, god of small comforts, represented by the great summer bear. I'm not a religious person, but obviously, as Sibling Dex is a monk, spirituality is a component of this book. But it's definitely not the main piece. It's like a current that sort of runs through it, but it's not preachy in any sort of way, which I appreciate. The futuristic nation Sibling Dex lives in is called Panga. Sibling Dex's wagon is waiting for them at the Half Moon Hive Monastery. at the city's edge and gets to enter their new home for the first time. On the side of the wagon is a large mural. Depicted large is Alalay's bear, well-fed and at ease in a field of flowers. All of the Sacred Six symbols were painted on the wagon's back end, along with a paraphrased snippet from the insights, a phrase any Pangan would understand. Find the strength to do both. The wagon that they're going to get to live in has multiple decks. Each of the wagon's decks had a playful arrangement of round windows, plus bubbled exterior lights for the darker hours. They had been built a tiny sanctuary, a mobile burrow that begged decks to come in and be still. Decks ran a hand along the wall, hardly believing that this was theirs. On the upper deck is a large bed. The sheets were creamy, the pillows plentiful, the blankets heavy as a hug. So everybody knows what a tea monk does. Dex wasn't too worried about getting started. People came up to the wagon with their problems and left with a fresh brewed cup of tea. But ultimately, the assignment for a tea monk is listen to people, make tea. Dex is really intent on doing this on their own. So the first day, Dex sets out the table. They recognize that the table looks kind of sparse. They buy some teas and they sit and they sit and they sit, and ultimately no one comes until someone does. It's a woman carrying a work bag. My cat died last night, she said right before bursting into tears. Dex realized with a stomach-souring thud that they were standing on the wrong side of the vast gulf between having read about doing a thing and doing the thing. They'd been a garden monk until the day before, and now they're completely at a loss. As a garden monk, there is an exchange expressed through environment, not through words. So they're not actually a tea monk yet, they're just a person sitting at a table with a bunch of mugs. Dex recognizes that their age, clearly past apprenticed age, and the fact that they're not apprenticing all communicates that they know what they're doing. They do not. They scrambled to recall the written advice they'd spent hours consuming, but not only had the specifics evaporated, their basic vocabulary had as well. It was one thing to know people would tell you their troubles. It was another to have an actual flesh and blood stranger in front of you, weeping profusely as means of introduction. This first exchange goes as you might expect it to. Dex fumbles around, they don't have any decaffeinated tea, they also recognize that they've forgotten chairs for people to sit in, and they think, maybe I should just return back to my monastery, maybe I should give up. But oh, how stupid they would look. Dex recognizes that at the end of this exchange, it's the woman whose cat has just died that is trying to make them feel better. How embarrassing. Piece by piece, they pack up their table. Like all of us that try something new and are ultimately unsuccessful on our first attempt because that's what learning and development is, Dex feels a sort of reluctance to go on, reservations about this relatively impulsive decision that they've made. But all those reservations vanish as they bike out into the villages. The sight of the open sky is delicious. The infrastructural delineation between human space and everything else was stark. Panga, 50% of Panga's single continent was designated for human use. The rest was left to nature, and the ocean was barely touched at all. It was a crazy split if you thought about it. Half the land for a single species, half for the hundreds of thousands of others. But then, humans had a knack for throwing things out of balance. Finding a limit they'd stick to was victory enough. Dex is biking, their wagon at their back, and they recognize that nothing about this meadow road that they're taking right now is new. But the context is, and that's what makes all the difference. They pass a sign, one in the direction of the home, the village that they were raised in, and the other to a new place, a place they've never been. And they think that they could go in the direction of home, sleep in a bed that they've always known, have a dinner that tastes like childhood. But then they'd have to explain that this plan that they'd laboriously pitched as the right thing to do actually had them feeling quite intimidated after a grand total of one try, and that they now, at the age of 29, would like very much to return to the safe shelter of childhood. Oh, how very stupid they'd look. And I think that line being in there twice before we've even hit page 20, a theme of this book is the way that the fear response, though extremely unpleasant and often quite painful, is the only weapon or tool that nature has at its disposal to keep ecosystems in balance. And so this fear of shame or embarrassment or looking stupid is the thing that ultimately propels the story forward, even though it's not necessarily a good reason. So, thinking about how dumb they'd feel explaining themselves to their sharp-eyed family, without a second thought or a hint of regret, Dex went left, toward the road unknown. Dex arrives in that city, goes to a stall that says, "Herbs, herbs, herbs." Sibling Dex walks up to the herb man, who's an attractive man about their age, and says, "I would like one of each." Herein starts Dex's journey to brew their very own set of teas, catered or tailored to the very specific problems that people will bring to them. There was a traveler's clearing nestled between the farmland and the residential ring. Dex parked their wagon there, and for 3 months, that's where they stayed. Eventually, the wagon becomes their own. Planters and knickknacks and tea accoutrement filling every available space. Stacks of used mugs containing the dregs of experiments, both promising and pointless, teetered on the table, awaiting the moment in which Dex had the brain space to do the washing up. Where the lower deck was frantic, the upper deck was serene. The upper deck was, for all intents and purposes, sacred ground. Sibling Dex understands the importance of boundaries. They rarely use the lights that are provided up there and instead tend to open the sunshade and often sleep under the stars, with the sounds of night cushioning them. They frequently asked themselves what they were doing, and they never truly felt like they got a handle on that, but they kept doing it all the same. This is a story about perseverance. This is a story about trusting your gut. This is a story about not necessarily being able to rationalize the call that's pushing you forward, but doing it anyway. Chapter 2 is called The Best Tea Monk in Panga. Is it Panga? Panga? So after 2 years of traveling this route, moving from village to village, with their wagon on their back, now, Sibling Dex has become known as the best tea monk in Panga. Often when they arrive in a village, there are already people waiting for them. Oh, in this utopian universe, everyone has a pocket computer given to them at age 16. It's kind of a coming of age present, and folks repair it when it needs repairing, but it's a computer that's meant to last a lifetime. Waste is something that's pretty frowned upon inside of this community. And there's really no need for waste, and there's no need for excess. Surplus is regarded as something that should be passed around. It's a universe and a society wherein everyone has their needs met when illness and poverty and bigotry have been solved for, and thus all problems are semi-solvable, or humanity is left to deal with only the innate aches and pains. We don't compound each other's suffering anymore in this universe. Dex travels on a route that has not been paved in the way that we understand roads to be paved with oil and concrete, but Sibling Dex has grown up in a world where staying on the path is one of the most enforced rules, because a forest floor, the woodland villagers knew, is a living thing. Vast civilizations lay within the mosaic of dirt, rodential panic rooms, crash pads for nomadic beetles, trees shyly locking toes with one another. Disturbing these things through digging was a violence, though sometimes a necessary one. Still, the human residents of this place were judicious about what constituted actual necessity, and as such, disturbed the ground as little as possible. It's a time when humans have not only come to respect one another, but to respect the entirety of the world around them. They've learned from their ancestors that existed in the factory days how disruptive and toxic disrespect is. Sibling Dex pulls into Inkthorn, which is an especially attractive village, home to some of the most skilled carpenters in the region. The hanging homes here, homes hanging in the trees. It's a book that provides a nice little escape. It's a book that manages to touch on all the things that we are currently struggling with in today's society, but imagines a future not designed by tech billionaires, and it's so wonderful to imagine that perhaps it is not entirely foolish to have hope. And when I'm reading it, I don't feel incredulous. It does feel possible. Perhaps if enough people could imagine it this way, we could achieve it. I'm not suggesting robot consciousness, but anything could happen. Everything there curved. The rain-shielding roofs, the life-giving windows, the bridges running between like jewelry. The homes were like trees themselves in that regard, unmistakably part of the specific visual category, yet each an individual unto itself. Dex pedals their way into one of the rare cleared areas, the market circle. Dex gave a different sort of nod to the small crowd that was already waiting at the circle's periphery, a nod that said, "Hey, I see you, I'll be ready soon." The first time Dex encountered people waiting for them, they felt immediately quite stressed. They felt compelled to some sort of urgency, but now they've learned to take their time. They have a system and routine about these things. The thing that people wanted took time to prepare. If they wanted it, they could wait. So the production begins. Dex remembers the people of the town just as the people of the town remember them. Likes, preferences, and allergies. They have boxes that they carry, jars arranged, bags unpacked, kettle deployed, water boiling, creamers at the ready. Once Dex's table is finally arranged, they sit back and they wait. The first customer, so to speak, arrives. It's Miss Jules. She says, "I'm so glad you're here today," with a weary huff. 6 reports of muckmite nests. 6. Dex says. "And my dog ate 3 pairs of my socks yesterday. Didn't chew holes, didn't rip them up, ate them. I had to get the vet from Elwood to come make sure she wasn't going to die, which I did not have time for." And Dex smirked. Didn't have time to see the vet, or didn't have time for your dog maybe dying? Both. So Dex has these conversations with folks, develops relationships with them. It's ultimately a traveling cafe that exists in nature. There are 2 mentions of pebbles being transferred from one pocket computer to another, but there doesn't seem to be any sort of arranged price. Also, Dex obviously was given this wagon by the people of an associated monastery, so we don't see Dex ever worry I think one of the points that this book is making is that when Dex felt stagnant in their life, they were able to immediately change their vocation on a whim. This is something not available to almost all humans because education has become so expensive and thus unattainable. Changing your job in today's day and age, recognizing that you were maybe wrong about what you chose at 18 years old, if you did have the privilege of attending college or attaining any sort of secondary education, is now unthinkable. It's not just unrealistic to be able to change your life if you find yourself unhappy in it, but it's actually implausible, if not impossible. That's even before you contemplate maybe having a family of any sort. So Becky Chambers is calling attention to the fact that in today's society, we sort of become prisoners, not just to our paycheck, but to the decisions we made as children. In a post-capitalist world, we would be more free to explore other types of lives. So while there is mention of transferring of pebbles, we don't see anyone be concerned about money, and we do see a lot of sharing. Interaction doesn't seem to be transactional in the same way that it is right now. Dex offers Miss Jules a second cup, and Miss Jules says, "I don't have time." And Sibling Dex says, "Anyone that sees you here will understand." And they would, because it was hard to find a Pangan who hadn't at least once spent a very necessary hour or two in the company of a tea monk. So now, in this future utopian universe, not only is the concept of something like therapy or disclosure of troubles and a moment of rest and reprieve regular and a necessary tool that all humans use to move forward in life, but there's no stigma around it. We follow Miss Jules as she sits down on one of the cushions that Dex has laid out. She closed her eyes and let out a tremendous sigh, her shoulders visibly slumped. She always had the ability to relax them, she just needed permission to do so. So as they worked the line, filling mugs and listened carefully and blending herbs on the fly when the situation called for it, the mat was soon full of people. Pleasant chatter naturally drifted along here and there, but most folks kept to themselves. Some read books on their computers, some slept, a few cried, which was normal. Their fellow tea drinkers offered shoulders for this. Dex provided handkerchiefs and refills as necessary. One of Inkthorn's council members comes to offer Dex an invitation to dinner. Dex says, "I'd love to. Gifted meals were one of the nicer perks of their work. What's the occasion?" The council member says, "You." Dex blinks with surprise. "You're joking." "No, seriously. We wanted to do something special to say thanks for what you bring to this town." Dex was flattered, to say the least, and unsure of what to do with a compliment like that. "Least we can do for the best tea monk in Panga." I don't know if it's Panga or Panga. I'm just going to keep going back and forth. As far as being a tea monk went, Sibling Dex is about as successful as you can be. And this is only 2 years in, right? The first floundering is not a reflection of who Sibling Dex would become. And yet, at some undefined point, Dex started waking each morning, feeling like they hadn't slept. Their thirst for the cricket song has not been quenched. They'd noticed it, of course, but honing their craft had consumed them, and they knew crickets to be absent in the satellite villages. It hadn't bothered them for a while. But then, as Dex goes on, they start asking here and there, "Do you have crickets? Do you have crickets here?" Dex had asked with affected nonchalance around dinner tables and public saunas, in shrines and tool swaps and bakeries. Eventually, Dex stopped asking about crickets and finally just looked the damn thing up. Crickets, as it turned out, were extinct in most of Panga. Numerous species have bounced back after the transition, but many others had been left in a state too fragile to recover, and not all wounds are capable of healing. But so what, right? Dex was the best tea monk in Panga. If the chatter was to be believed, that should have been enough. That should have been more than enough. But they find that their favorite part of the day, the part that they come to look forward to most, is the part when they return to their wagon, shut themselves inside, and spend a few precious, shapeless hours entirely alone. Why wasn't it enough? So, Sibling Dex pulls out their pocket computer and decides to do some searching, as was their habit first thing in the morning. Dimly aware of the hope that always spurred them to do so, that there might be something good there, something exciting or nourishing, something that would replace the weariness. And everything on the little screen should have fit the bill, right? Sibling Dex gets to make their own schedule. They spend their entire life traveling from village to village. They are revered for what they do. They feel nourished by what they do. Ultimately, they get to spend their entire life dedicating themselves to a craft that feels worthwhile. And that should be enough. And yet, it isn't. They find on their phone notes from other villagers, thanking them for their service and for what they bring to these villages every day. A letter, a long, heartfelt letter from their father, detailing the things that are going on at their village at home, and ultimately expressing the most important thing, that they are loved. And why isn't it enough? What is it? They asked without speaking. The gods did not communicate in this way, and could not answer. But the instinct to call out was still there, and Dex indulged it. What's wrong with me? Eventually, they look up cricket recordings, and Dex finds themselves playing them on a loop. The reedy pulse of cricket-filled forest was conjured through their speakers, an immortal snap snapshot of the ecosystem long gone. Eventually, they're listening to the various recordings of the different crickets that have existed throughout the world archaeologists had the foresight to record. They stumble upon the cloud cricket, Spring 33, PT 1135, Hartsbrow Armitage, Chesterbridge. Dex recognizes that they know this place, and on a whim, they decide to go. The Hartsbrow Armitage was a remote monastery located near the summit of one of the lower mountains in the Antlers. The Armitage was intended as sanctuary for both clergy and pilgrims who desired respite from urban life. It was abandoned at the end of the Factory Age, and the site now lies within the protected wilderness zone established during the Transitional Era. Dex wonders they're still there. Dex thinks, I could go there and find out. It was a stupid idea, easy to brush away like the countless other moments in the day when a brain spins nonsense. Here is why you can't go, Dex thought to themselves. The map guide came back with a notification Dex had never seen before. Warning, the route you have entered goes outside of human settlement areas and into protected wilderness. Wildlife is unpredictable and unaccustomed to humans. This route is not recommended. Dex nodded to themselves in an I told you so kind of way, got on their ox bike, and started to ride toward their scheduled route. They knew what the scene in Hammerstrike would be. They knew what the ride the day after that would look like, and the day after that, 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 and the day after that. They stopped the wagon. I bet it's quiet out there. No, they replied, and continued on. They stopped the wagon again 20 minutes later. I bet you could travel that road for days and never see another person, they thought. The wagon has everything you need. No, they think, and continue on. An hour later, they stop one more time. They stood there on the road, staring at the paving, feeling that the sun had grown unnaturally bright. The idea danced, and Dex would have sworn they were drunk or high or feverish, but on the contrary, what came next felt clear-headed as could be. They send a message to Hammerstrike, letting the people there know that they were very sorry, but they would have to postpone their stop. Personal matters. Dex recognizes that they should feel guilty for ultimately canceling their day at the last minute, but they didn't. They felt great. With effort, they turned the wagon around and headed for a road they'd never seen before. What are you doing? I don't know, they replied with a nervous grin. I have no idea. The forest starts to change as Dex is traveling along this route to the Hermitage. Here, the trees were taller than any buildings you'd find outside the city. Their branches look like pious fingers against the distant sky. The road itself becomes a relic, paved in black asphalt, an oil road made for oil motors and oil tires and oil fabric and oil frames. And more than once, Dex had to hop off the saddle to walk their vehicle around a pothole or clear debris from the road. Dex is thinking of all the news stories that they've heard throughout the course of their life. The wilderness is untouched post-transition. Humans aren't necessarily supposed to enter this area. It's not forbidden or illicit activity by any means, it's just not protected. And in a universe where humans are about as comfortable as history has ever known, there's really no reason to venture into an unprotected area, except that Dex has this call, this feeling, this need, this drive. The wilderness was not known for letting the foolish return. They pedaled and pushed and dragged and walked and climbed and climbed and climbed. Eventually, they get to a space where there's not a branch across the road, but a tree. It was a small tree, but still a whole ass tree clogging up the road. Dex slid off the saddle once more, straddling the frame of their bike, and thought, not for the first time, that maybe this was a stupid idea. Dex thinks about all the comforts that they've just walked away from. The hot springs they could soak in, a good cookhouse that probably had a rack of something wild over the fire. Dex imagines lights twinkling in the dark, guiding them back to the place made specifically for humans. And thus, they travel on. Dex kicked down the wagon's brakes. They shoved, they swore, they rolled the damn tree out of the way and continued their ride. They're riding their wagon up this enormous hill, climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing. And just as they were wondering if it was possible for a person's lungs to actually explode, they crested one last hump. Then, there's a gentle downhill wind. Dex coasts along, mercifully at ease. As the slope flattened out, it curved left, and what lay off the road there gave Dex a giddy rush. Adrenaline, sure, but triumph, too. Because in a world where everything is comfortable and where humans all help each other, there is a lack of the perseverance necessary in order to garner survival or to build a safe life. It requires less grit than what we would maybe now understand. So there's a triumph, too. Dex can see it for what it really is. The perfect campsite. The clearing was level and spacious yet snug, wreathed with trees, as though the forest were cupping its hand around it. Dex parked the bike and the wagon, then collapsed happily onto the ground. Nobody in the world knows where I am right now, and the notion of that filled them with bubbling excitement. They had canceled their life, bailed out on a whim. Dex sets up a campsite, so to speak, and usually, like they've mentioned, they end up bathing in the hot springs or using the village accommodations that are available to them. But their wagon does have a shower that they can set up, so they set up shower, they set up their little fire situation, and they settle in for food and a good scrub. They nodded, not a traitor nod or a service nod, a please pleased nod, a satisfied nod, the kind of nod that nodded best when it had no audience. After a minute or so, they take out their pocket computer in search of music. They bobbed along as they fetched the makings of dinner from inside the wagon. They're cooking vegetables, they've started their shower, and they get in to scrub off all the dirt and sweat and exertion of the day. Dex is singing along. They sang as they filled their hair with a thick lather of sweet mint soap. Gods, it was good to be outside. They shut off the water and reached for the towel on its usual hook, but their hand meant nothing. They forgot their towel in their wagon. Happens to the best of us. They passed, dripping by the kitchen, where the crisping onions and melting butter mingled deliciously. They're still singing, not to the wagon, but to the fireside. They're naked, getting as close to the flames as possible. Dex sang, moving their fists in pistons. They turned around, confidence growing, shaking their bare posterior toward their fire. Dex would not finish the particular verse that they were singing, because in that moment, a 7-foot-tall, metal-plated, boxy-headed robot strode briskly out of the woods. Hello! Dex froze. Butt out, hair dripping, heart skipping, whatever thoughts they'd been entertaining, vanished forever. My name is Mosscap. What do you need, and how may I help? Chapter 3 is called Splendid, Speckled, Mosscap. Dex realized slowly, still naked, still dripping, that the robot wanted them to shake its hand. Dex did not. The robot pulled back. Oh dear. Have I done something wrong? You're the first human I've ever met. The large mammals I'm most familiar interacting with are river wolves, and they respond best to a direct approach. Are you afraid of me? Yeah, Dex said. The robot crouched, trying to align itself with Dex's height. Does this help? That's more condescending than anything. Allow me to reassure you, I mean you no harm, and my quest in human territory is one of goodwill. I thought that much would be obvious from the parting promise, but perhaps it was presumptuous of me to assume. Dex isn't a particularly political monk. Sibling Dex is not a historian monk either. They're a gardener and a tea monk. Their knowledge or history of the parting promise or even the transition is going to be base level at best, that of which all other civilization is familiar with, but Dex doesn't have any particular expertise as it relates to robots or their parting promise. Dex recognizes the dinner is burning. The robot walked up behind them, and Dex goes over to try to salvage their food. This is cooking! It's very exciting to see cooking. It was cooking, Dex said. What is happening? Dex asks the robot to help them find their towel. The robot opened the wagon door and leaned in as much of itself as it could inside. Belongings! Oh, this is a delight. And you have so many all over. Towel! Dex turns off the music. A bloodsuck landed on their bare shoulder. They slapped it irritably. Sorry, Dex said to the remains of the bug as they wiped it on a kitchen cloth. The robot noted this. Did you just apologize to the bloodsuck for killing it? Yes. Why? It didn't do anything wrong. It was acting in its nature. Is this typical of people, to apologize to things you kill? Yeah. Did you apologize to each of these plants individually as you harvested them, or in aggregate? We do not apologize to plants. Why not? Dex eventually asks what this robot wants and why it's here. This is a really big deal. This is the first contact between humans and robots since the factory days, which is hundreds of years prior. Dex asks if robots is the politically correct word, and Mosscap assures Dex that yes, it's robots. Mosscap also says, technically, its full name is Splendid Speckled Mosscap, but our remembrance of humans is that you like to shorten names. Dex says, like the mushroom? The robot's metal cheeks rose. Exactly like the mushroom. We name ourselves for the first thing we notice when we wake up. Do you have a gender? No. Me neither. Dex looked around the campsite, which suddenly looked hopelessly shabby. Dex says, can you give me a second while I get dressed? And Mosscap says, sure. Can I watch? And Dex says, no. The robot looked a touch disappointed. No problem. The robot sits in a chair for the first time and is like, interesting. Dex asks if Mosscap ever gets tired, and Mosscap says no. I sit or lie down if I want to alter my field of vision. Otherwise, I can stand for as long as my battery will allow. Dex says, I thought you ran on oil. Mosscap says, Solar power wasn't mainstream when we left, but it was around, and one of the manufacturers of the associated hardware provided us with these before our departure, so we wouldn't have to rely on human fuel. It yanks off a panel of its midsection, and then it's like, wait, what's the matter? Dex sat with their fork halfway stalled toward their mouth, staring in mild shock at the thing that had just ripped its own stomach open. Mosscap seems to comprehend. Oh, don't worry. I feel nothing. That didn't hurt. Look. The robot snaps the panel back into place. Then, the robot leans forward and seems to say in earnestness, I am here to see how humans have gotten along without us. As is outlined in the parting promise, we are guaranteed complete freedom of travel in human territories, and rights equal to that of any Pangan citizen, Dex said, the atrophied memory kicking in at last. You were told you could come back any time, and that we wouldn't be the ones to initiate contact. We'd leave you alone unless you wanted otherwise. Precisely. And my kind would still very much like to be left alone. But we're also curious. We know our leaving the factories was a great inconvenience to you, and we wanted to make sure you'd done all right. So you're checking in. Essentially. It's a little more specific than that. Mosscap leaned back, noticing the armrests for the first time. Are these for arms? Sorry, there's just so much here to experience. I keep getting distracted. To the point, I was sent here to answer the following question. What do humans need? That's a question with a million answers. What do humans need is an unanswerable question that changes from person to person, minute to minute. We can't predict our needs beyond the base things that we require to survive. Dex says, it's like my teas. I give them to people based on whatever kind of comfort they need in that moment. Ah, you're a tea monk. You're not just Dex, you're Sibling Dex. I apologize, Mosscap pointed to the wagon. The symbols are there, I just didn't recognize them. The style is so different now, hundreds of years later. So much has changed from what we recorded. Dex is confused. I didn't expect you to know about the gods. If you mean the custom of human religion, we know everything we observed of you during our time together. But as for the gods themselves, they're everywhere and in everything. Surely you know this. This leads Mosscap to pose the question. Dex, the tea monk, would maybe be the perfect concierge or guide, so to speak, for Mosscap. Dex knows the various villages, knows how to travel from town to town, the different customs, so to speak. Perhaps Dex could serve as an introduction, Mosscap to the people. I need you. I need a guide. There will be so much I don't recognize, and I knew this would be the case. I anticipated it, yes, but I have worried about it. It would be more efficient with you, more fun. The robot smiled, as wide as its faceplates would allow. Dex is basically like, no. And Mosscap is like, why not? Do you not want my company? And Dex is like, I don't know you. And remember, the only pleasure that we've really seen Dex take part in is alone time. And we know that the reason that Dex abandoned their life, bailed out on their life to come out here to the wilderness is ultimately to be alone. And on their first night, they've been bombarded by a robot, which would ultimately be like being bombarded by a ghost. Like, this is pretty reality shattering for Dex. Dex says, I'm not even going back to the villages anyway. I'm going up to Heartsbrow. And Mosscap says, why? Oh, the Hermitage. Are you going to the Hermitage? Sibling Dex, have you been to the wilderness before? That'll take you at least a week, and it's very easy to get lost in the wilderness, particularly for humans. Dex says, I thought you said robots hadn't had any contact with humans. And Mosscap says, not alive. No, implying that other humans have ventured out into the wilderness and Mosscap has stumbled upon their bodies. Dex says, well, I'm not going to leave the road. This road leads all the way to the Hermitage, right? So the robot says, Sibling Dex, I feel that we've perhaps started on the wrong foot here, and I don't quite know what I've done wrong. But if you'll allow me to offer some advice, I think this is a bad idea. Then Mosscap says, well, I have no schedule, so I'll just come with you. I can get you there safely, and on the way, you can tell me all that I need to know about human custom. A fair exchange, no? In the grand scheme of things, it was fair, and probably wise, and certainly less taxing than the robot's starting proposal. But no, this was weird and confusing, and the opposite of being alone. Mosscap says, you need time to process. I understand. Dex goes into their wagon, looks at all of their things. Everything is the same as before, the plants and the books and the mugs. And yet, everything feels different. Now there was a robot sitting by their fire asking them if they could swap a crash course in a couple centuries of human culture for a backcountry trail escort. Dex sat for a while. They stood, they sat, they stood, they paced. They spend a lot of time ruminating about how ridiculously inadequate they are as it relates to being the right person for this job. They're not a historian, they're not an academic, and they're not a scientist, or any of the myriad professions infinitely better suited to facilitating the first contact between humans and robots in 200 years. Dex decides that no, they're not going to do this. They have satellite signal, they're going to send Mosscap in the direction of the village that they were supposed to go to, and they're going to alert the town council that Mosscap's on its way. That would be their contribution, and then they could read about whatever happens when they get back. They open their door, prepared to reject this offer, when Mosscap says, shh, don't startle it. Something shuffled in the dark. It shuffled loudly, largely. Mosscap was frozen, alert, but made no motion to leave. Did robots run from danger? Did they need to? A huge bramble bear stepped out of the shadows and into the firelight, sniffing the ground with its fat, wet nose. It looked up. Straight at Dex. Dex quickly swung their own gaze down, knowing that the last thing you want to do is look a bear in the eye, unless you wanted that to be truly the last thing you do. Dex wanted to close the door, but was too afraid to move. The bear starts to move in Dex's direction, ambles over to the fire, eats the remnants of what was going to be Dex's dinner. Once there was nothing left, it drifted again toward the wagon. Dex's hand shuts the door very quickly, and Dex happens to know that their wagon is bear-proof because they've arrived back to it after dinners at the village to find it battered around by bears because bears are trying to get into all of the sweets and treats that Dex has inside. So Dex isn't worried about the wagon, but they're worried about the fact that this time they're inside the wagon and they are not bear-proof. But incongruously with the ways of its kind, Bear left the wagon alone, moseys back into the woods, the brief intersection of their lives, complete. The robot's elated words came muffled through the wagon wall. Wasn't that exciting? Dex slid down to the floor, hands locked on their still damp hair. They thought of the paint job outside, which Mosscap had been so interested in. They thought of the storage crate they leaned against now, filled with decorations for their pop-up shrine. They thought of the pendant, resting, as it always did, against the hollow of their throat. Bears. All of it. Bears, bears, bears. Sibling Dex, dutiful disciple, traveling tea-monk, lifelong student of the Sacred Six, leaned their head back against the box, stared at the ceiling for a few moments, shut their eyes. Fuck. Chapter 4. An object and an animal. Dex has taken the bear as a sign that Mosscap and Dex are meant to go on this journey together. It's one thing to agree to an offer to hang out with a robot, it's entirely another to know what to say. Dex is pedaling on their bike, Mosscap is walking alongside them. I could help, I don't know if we'd go much faster. I could push or pull, depending on... Absolutely not. The robot fell silent, the finality in Dex's voice preventing any further discussion. They have a conversation about objects, animals, purpose, and parts. Robots are not people. We're machines, and machines are objects. Objects are its. I'd say you're more than just an object. The robot looked a touch offended. I would never call you just an animal, Sibling Dex. It turned its gaze to the road, head held high. We don't have to fall into the same category to be of equal value. Dex hadn't thought of it like that. You're right, I'm sorry. Mosscap says don't be. This is an exchange, remember? These things will happen. Mosscap is filling Dex in on the life of a robot, and ultimately robots get to do whatever they want. They live in harmony with one another, and they do have communities. They have meetups every now and then, and they have ways of communication, but they're definitely not networked. Mosscap says Fire Nettle, for example, walks up to mountain one day and then they didn't see Fire Nettle for 6 years. I thought it had broken down, but it was watching a sapling grow from seed. Oh, and there's Black Marbled Frost Frog. It's something of a legend. It's been holed up in a cave watching staglamites for 3.5 decades and plans to do nothing else. I think this is another commentary on post-capitalist society, that obviously the entire book is about purpose and drive and ambition and finding your worth in yourself, but the idea that these beings, these objects, get to exist in the form of consciousness and ultimately work to achieve nothing, that it's not about achievement, it's about existing and being, is, it's just cool. Mosscap says they have no need for shelter or food, so they don't have any sort of settlements, but they do have meeting places, glades, mountaintops, that kind of thing. They meet every 200 days. We talk, we share. What does any social being do? Mosscap says they're not all single-minded objects, or particularly solitary. Some robots travel in groups. I was part of a trio for a while, me and Milton's millipede and Pollen Cloud. We had wonderful conversations together, but Milton's millipede became distinctly interested in fish spawning, and I was uninterested in observing that particular event in depth, so we parted ways. No hard feelings. Dex asked, how did you come to be the lone representative that's going to engage in contact with humanity? I was the first that volunteered. You are nothing like I expected, Dex said at last. I didn't expect to meet any of you ever, but I wouldn't have pictured you. You're so flexible, fluid, not structured or strict, the way we'd pictured robots or objects to be. Mosscap looks amused. What a curious notion. And Dex says, what? You're a machine. And machines only work because of numbers and logic. Mosscap says, yeah, that's how we function, not how we perceive. Have you ever watched ants? Dex says, sure, but probably not like you have. Does an ant reflect on being an ant? Unlikely, but maybe. We can't rule it out. Let's assume, though, for the sake of conversation, that it does not. Let's assume that ants lack that particular flavor of neural complexity. In that respect, it seems to me that creatures with less complicated intelligences than humans are more in line with how you'd expect a machine to behave. Your brain, the human brain, started out as food good, other apes bad mechanism. You still have those root functions deep down in there, but you are so much more than that. To distill you down to what you grew out of would be like, stop the bike, if you would. They get out, and Mosscap gestures, motions to the mural painted on the side of the wagon. How would you describe this painting? Dex said, happy, cheerful, welcoming. That's one way to describe it. Could you not also describe it as pigment and lacquer smeared onto wood? Is that not what it is? Ah, that would be missing the point, thinking of it backwards. Missing the forest for the trees. Precisely. Mosscap touched their metal torso, smiling with pride. I am made of metal and numbers, and you are made of water and genes. But we are each something more than that. And we can't define what that something more is simply by our raw components. You don't perceive the way an ant does, in the same way that I don't perceive the way, say, a vacuum cleaner would. Do you still have vacuum cleaners? Mosscap says, I figured people would have studied our awakening. And Dex says, well, you're not here. It's hard to study something in its absence. And trying to make more of you is simply an ethical mess. The robot takes this conversation and the feelings that it has inside of it as confirmation that it is where it should be. So if Two Foxes is into bird calls, what about you? What's your thing? Insects, Mosscap cried. Its voice was jubilant jubilant as if it had spent every second prior waiting for Dex to broach the subject. Oh, I love them so much. All invertebrates, really. Then it says, you see, this is my problem. Most of my kind have a focus. Not nearly sharp focused as two foxes or black marbled rock frog necessarily, but they have an area of expertise, at least. Whereas I like everything. Everything is interesting. It's not a very studious way to be. Dex says, I can think of a bunch of monks who would disagree with you. You study Bosch's domain, it sounds like. A very big, top-down kind of way. You're a generalist. That's a focus. Mosscap's eyes widen. Thank you, Sibling Dex. I hadn't thought of it that way. While on the road, a hole is punctured in Dex's water tank, and so Dex is losing a lot of water, and this is a huge problem because they are off-road. Mosscap is helping them by stopping the hole while Dex looks for the tape. Eventually, the two work together to plug the hole, but their water supply is extremely diminished. Mosscap says, okay, well, that's all right. I know a stream off path. I'll just carry the water tank over there and we'll just refill it. And Dex says, wait, stop. Put that down right now. I can't let you help me. Why not? Because I need to do it. By their sex ethos, hard labor is equal to goodness. And the purpose of a tool is to bolster one's own physical or mental abilities, not to offload one's work entirely. Obviously, Dex can't lift the water tank. Simply impossible. They don't have the equipment. Mosscap says, why can't I help you? It feels wrong. You're not supposed to do my work for me. It doesn't feel right. Mosscap blinks. Because of the factory days, when robots were ultimately enslaved, Dex looked awkwardly at the ground, ashamed of a past they'd never seen. The robot mulls over this moral dilemma for Dex. You see me more as a person than an object, even though that's very, very wrong. But you can't see me as a friend, even though I'd like to be. Sibling Dex, has it occurred to you that maybe I want to fix this? That I deeply, keenly want to get you where you're going, not out of charity, not out of obligation, but because I'm interested? I appreciate the intent, I really do. But if you don't want to infringe upon my agency, let me have agency. I want to carry the tank. Dex says, fine, carry the tank. And Mosscap says, I don't need your permission either way. And Dex stammers, no, I meant. Mosscap says, I'm just teasing. Then, as Mosscap walks into the forest, a powerful instinct had arisen in Dex. A rule shouted full force by an army of parents and teachers and rangers and public service announcements and road signs. There's no trail. Animals walk through the forest all the time. How do you think trails get made? No, I don't mean those kinds of trails. They pointed to the road. They mean these kinds of trails. Trails that have been paved. Nature that has been disrupted for a singular purpose. A trail's a trail, Mosscap says. It's just there to make travel easier. And to protect the ecosystem from said travel. Like a barrier. Exactly like a barrier. Better to cut one path through a place than to damage the whole thing. But surely that only applies if you're talking about a place that lots of people regularly pass through. Dex shook their head firmly, in synchrony with the teachers and rangers of their youth. Everybody thinks they're the exception to the rule, and that's exactly where the trouble starts. One person can do a lot of damage. Every living thing can do damage to others, Sibling Dex. You'd all starve otherwise. Have you ever watched a bull elk mow its way through a bite bulb thicket? It's a fine lesson in trampling. Sometimes damage is unavoidable. In fact, I assure you, we've both killed countless tiny things just in the last few steps we've taken. Now, will you please follow me to the damn creek? For all Dex protesting about the sanctity of trails, it was only in their absence that Dex truly understood what a trail was. Travel on a trail felt liquid. Travel off of it, Dex was learning, felt sharp as glass. The forest was stunning, however, and in tiny cognitive gaps between loose gravel, watch that plant, over, under. Careful! Dex registered the undeniable beauty of the place. They arrive at the stream. Under any other circumstances, it would have seemed lovely. Water tumbled over rocks, both smooth and multi-hued. Dappled sun caught in currents like glitter. But Dex wasn't there to look at the stream. Dex was there to take from the stream. The slimy fish and the skimming bugs and the better left nameless leavings traveling under, the cadaver-colored leaves floating over. What's the matter? Mosscap asked. This is gonna sound stupid, Dex said, but I know that all water comes from some place like this, but this water looks quite dangerous to me. Mosscap says, if you're willing to walk a little farther, I want to show you something. Mosscap takes Dex to an old factory. The decrepit building had been a beverage bottling plant once, though Dex would not have known this if Mosscap hadn't explained. All factory-age ruins looked the same. Hulking towers of boxes, bolts, and tubes. Brutal. Utilitarian. But corpse was not an apt word for this sort of building, because a corpse was a rich resource, a bounty of nutrients ready to be divided and reclaimed. But a factory-age building, a metal building, that was of no benefit to anything beyond the small creatures that enjoyed some temporary shelter in its remains. It would corrode until it collapsed. That would be the most it would achieve. Its only legacy was to persist where it did not belong. Dex had seen ruins many times in their travels. Some had been harvested for recyclable materials, others had been given a new purpose, but a few were left in full sight of the highways as a reminder of what the world had once been and what it could become once again. Repeating history that had left left living memory was an all too human tendency. What do you know about this place? Dex said in a hush. Mosscap stood beside them, gazing up at an eerie light. Almost nothing, except for what this place was, and that part of me doesn't like it here. What do you mean? I don't know. It's a remnant I have. I want to understand this feeling before I dive into human life. Some part of me is afraid of your world, but I don't know what that means, or if it's worth listening to. Do you not remember how things were? Wait, you don't know. You can't think I come from the factories. Dex is like, don't you? The robot laughed, the sound echoing off the walls. Sibling Dex? Of course not. I am wild built. We wouldn't be having this conversation if I'd been in operation since the factories. I mean, look at me. It's as if an obvious joke. Joke was not obvious. My components are from factory robots, yes, but those individuals broke down a long time ago. Their bodies were harvested by their peers, who reworked their parts into new individuals, their children, so to speak. I'm part of the 5th build. My torso was taken from small quail nest, and before that, it belonged to Blanket Ivy and Ottermound, and before that, it opened a compartment in its chest, switched on a light with its fingertip, and illuminated the space within. Dex peeked inside and their eyes widened. Worn with time but kept clean with meticulous care. 643-14G, it read. Property of Weskin Textiles, Inc. Shit. You can touch it if you like. I'm not going to reach inside your chest. Dex says, so you don't have the memories from your parts. Not in a way that I find useful. I have some impressions of them. Single images. Feelings I know aren't mine. Remnants. And one of those remnants is afraid of places like this. Wary, cautious, a little uncomfortable. How many other robots are you made from? 16 factory originals. So if the parts still work, why not fix them when the robots break down? Mosscap nodded emphatically. Ultimately, the decision was that it would be a less desirable path forward. But that's immortality. How is that less desirable? Because nothing else in this world behaves that way. Everything else breaks down and is made into other things. You are made of molecules that originated in an unmeasurable amount of organisms. You eat dozens of dead things every single day to maintain your form. And when you die, bits of you will be taken in turn by bacteria and beetles and worms. And so it goes. We robots are not natural beings. We know this. But we are still subject to the parent god laws, just like everything else. How could we continue to be students of the world if we don't emulate its most intrinsic cycles? If they had simply fixed themselves, they'd be behaving in opposition to everything they're attempting to study. Are you afraid of that? Dex asked. Of death? Of course, Mosscap said. All conscious things are. Why else do snakes bite? Why do birds fly away? Because that's part of the lesson too, I think. Like Wynn's paradox. I don't know what that is. It's this famous idea that life is fundamentally at odds with itself. Way back in the day, people killed all the wild dogs in Blue Bank because they wanted to go fishing and hiking and whatever without maybe getting mauled. Right, and that wrecked the ecosystem there. Specifically, the elk wrecked the ecosystem there. They ventured into places they hadn't before, and they ate everything. And it was messing up waterways, and all sorts of other species were thrown out of whack because of it. A huge mess. But if you think about it from the elk's perspective, this was the greatest thing that had ever happened. The whole reason they never went into those fields before is because they were afraid. And being afraid all the time is an awful way to live. It must have been such a relief to be free of predators and eat whatever the hell they wanted. But that was the exact opposite of what the ecosystem needed. The ecosystem required the elk to be afraid in order to stay in balance. But elk don't want to be afraid. Fear is miserable, as is pain. We're all just trying to be comfortable and well-fed and unafraid. And the people who made places like this weren't at fault either. At least, not at first. They just wanted to be comfortable. They wanted their children to live past the age of 5. They wanted everything to stop being so fucking hard. Any animal would do the same, and they do if given the chance, just like the elk. So the paradox is that the ecosystem as a whole needs its participation to act with restraint in order to avoid collapse. But the participants themselves have no inbuilt mechanisms to encourage such behavior other than fear, which is a feeling you want to avoid or stop at all costs. Mosscap asks, so what did they do about the ecosystem? They reintroduced wild dogs and everything balanced back out. What did the people that wanted to go hiking and fishing do? They don't. Or if they do, they accept the risks, just like the elk. Because the alternative outcome is scarier than the dogs. You're still relying on fear to keep things in check. Pretty much, said Dex. They leaned their head back, getting a good look at the ceiling. There was an eerie beauty to it, grotesque and tragic. Why did you bring me here? Dex asked Mosscap. I wanted to show you that I understood how you felt about the water, about the algae. The algae in the stream, that's what bothered you, wasn't it? I guess so. I know it's going to be filtered out, but something... I don't know. Mosscap smiled. Some part of you didn't like it. A remnant. An evolutionary remnant. Trying to keep you from getting sick. Remnants are powerful things. Hard to ignore. But you have the sense and the tools to avoid getting sick from that water. I know that the world that I'm headed into is not the world the originals walked away from. So we're smarter than our remnants, is what Dex is saying. If we choose to be. Mosscap nods. That's what makes us different than the elk. It's pretty here, Dex said. Yeah, it is, Mosscap said, as if making a decision within itself. It is. Dying things often are. I think there's something beautiful about being lucky enough to witness a thing on its way out. Chapter 6. Grass hen with wilted greens and caramelized onion. One of Dex's many, many cousins back in Haydale had a young kid named Augie. Someday in the undefined future, Augie would be brilliant, but for the time being, they were annoying as hell. Dex remembers one time, Augie, who had long since been put to bed, came marching back into a circle in cotton pajamas, imbued with a level of confidence Dex could not remember ever possessing, demanding to know why feet had toes and why toes couldn't be more like fingers. Bedtime be damned, Augie had to know. The reason that Dex is thinking of Augie is because Mosscap is reminding them a lot of them. And that, Mosscap said, nodding toward the chopping board, I'm unfamiliar with this type of bulb. This is an onion. Mosscap angled its head so it was looking straight at Dex's face. Much, much too close. What is the point of an onion? It's delicious. Is there any danger? Can I help? You could get the onion started, if you want, Dex said. Mosscap looked as though it had just been told that today was festival day. What do I do? The pan's already hot. Just throw some butter in it. The robot gestured at the scraps with the tip of a knife. These you do not eat. Right, I see. Dex takes over the onions and says you stir them around like this. Mosscap says, may I try? I feel somewhat invested in this now. Mosscap lifted the pan to show Dex the onions. Do these look right? Yeah, you're doing great. The robot beamed, stirring with pride. Silence fell between Dex and Mosscap yet again, but this time there wasn't anything awkward about it. Honestly, Dex thought it was kind of nice. Dex said, you know, if you wanted, you could go cut me some mountain thyme. The robot's irises widened. I've never harvested a living thing for food before. You cooked the onion? Yes, but I wasn't the one who removed it from the ground. It looked pensively at the knife in its hand. I'm not sure. I mean, it's one thing to watch. Dex says, hey, that's all right. Just keep stirring. Mosscap did so, looking relieved. Cooking together had been comfortable, but every single time Dex has to eat in front of Mosscap, they feel very, very uncomfortable. They're wondering why that is. Mosscap sat across from them in a spare chair, posture attentive, face parked in happy neutral, hands resting on its knees, smiling at Dex. Dex sets their fork down. They can't eat. I figured out what's wrong. It's that I can't offer you food. I don't eat. I know you don't eat, and yet it feels so incredibly rude not to offer you anything, especially since you helped. Mosscap looked at Dex's plate. There's physically no way for me to consume that. I know. Putting that inside me would harm me. Or attract animals. Mosscap is intrigued by the idea, and Dex discourages this. You can't bait yourself. Stop it. Sibling Dex, I know you'd offer me food if I could eat, but I can't. Mosscap is trying to relieve Dex of this pressure. I don't know if I can explain how fundamental this is. If someone comes to your table, you feed them, even if it means you're a little hungrier. That's how it works. I feel like somewhere my mother is pissed at me. So this is a familial expectation. More cultural. I'd find it rude if I went to anyone's home and wasn't offered food. We have a surplus, and a surplus has to be shared. Mosscap says, you've never really talked about your family before. You say that you're from Haydale, but you say you left when you were old enough to become an initiate. You never talk about your people. I keep in touch. I visit, but we're, I don't know, estranged? No, the word didn't fit. Not at all. I love them. They love me. I never really fit there. We don't have much in common, except a need to share food. Yeah, I guess so. I have an idea. Can you hold this for a sec? Dex takes half of their food and puts it on another plate and hands that plate to Mosscap. After a moment of letting their new situation sit, Dex nodded with relief and began to eat with gusto. Mosscap, it seemed, had absorbed their discomfort. It held the plate awkwardly, looking lost as Dex ate. Then, when Dex finishes their plate, they ask Mosscap, you gonna eat that? If Mosscap had been confused before, it was a full state of befuddlement now. We just discussed that No, say I'm done. You can have it if you want. Mosscap was like, no, I'm done. You can have it if you want. I appreciate it. The robot watched as Dex continued to eat. That's very silly. And entirely unnecessary. Work though. Then that's what we'll do. Chapter 7 is called The Wild. It is difficult for anyone born and raised in human infrastructure to truly internalize the fact that your view of the world is backwards. Even if you fully know that you live in a natural world that existed before you and will continue long after. Even if you know that the wilderness is the default state of things and that nature is not something that only happens in carefully curated enclaves between towns. Even if you spend your whole life believing yourself to be deeply in touch with ebb and flow, you will still have trouble picturing the untouched world. You will still struggle to understand that human constructs are carved out and overlaid, that these are the places that are in between, not the other way around. Dex stares at the place that the asphalt disappears. There has been some sort of avalanche. The road that Dex and Mosscap had been following to the Hermitage has been wiped out. There's no way for them to get across. Sorry, Sibling Dex. They stare at the chaotic jumble ahead of them, trying to understand the feelings smoldering in their chest. There was disappointment in there, and dismay too, but as they unwrapped the snarl, the bulk of what they found was anger, constantly doubling itself like cells dividing. That at the suggestion that this meant giving up. The road is gone. The wagon couldn't travel. The longer those observations sat, the more Dex fumed. The place ahead was simply the world, as the world had always been, and would always be. Dex was presumably a part of it, a product of it, a being inextricably tied to its machinations. Dex felt helpless, hopeless, a turtle on its back, legs waving futilely in the air. Then Dex decides, whatever. Whatever. I'm going anyway. They pack a bag. Dex is cramming things into a bag. They're going regardless. Sibling Dex. No, Mosscap says. 2 days, Dex thought. Maybe 3. They grab protein bars, salted nuts, dried fruit, jerky, chocolate. Maybe you got the wrong impression before when we left the trail. Mosscap's voice was nervous. I've never been here. I don't know what's out there. They shuttered the wagon's windows, one by one. I don't understand, Mosscap said. Why is this so important? Something in Dex prickled furiously at the question, a secretive creature that did not wish to be poked. I'm going. Okay, Mosscap says. Then let's go. This is a really big deal, right? Humans don't venture into the wilderness. Dex has no experience with hiking. They're leaving everything that they know behind and venturing into the unknown wild. It's a very dangerous endeavor. Dex didn't care. Their palms and forearms were scraped and bloody. Dex didn't care. Bloodsucks were taking full advantage of the feast at hand. A blister on their foot. The sky was getting darker. The air was getting thinner. The mountain seemed to go on forever. Dex didn't care. Dex resented the robot's company. They did not want Mosscap there. They did not want anyone there. They thought of the sweet mint soap in their wagon, the fluffy red towel, the trusty camp shower that really wasn't anything special but was always there for them. What did humans do before showers? The human species did just fine for hundreds of thousands of years before any of that, so why can't you? Dex thinks to themselves. Then it begins to rain. Why are you doing this? Mosscap asks after a while. Why are you here, Sibling Dex? Did something happen to you? No. Did someone drive you away? No. You have friends in the city. You have family in Haydale. Why did you leave? Did they hurt you? No. Do they miss you? Gods, do they love you? Shut up! The words echoed against the rock, and as they bounced, Dex lost their grip. They fall off the mountain. Mosscap catches them, and they fall together. The robot wrapped its arms around Dex's body, absorbing the descent, and they both crashed backward onto the muddy ledge below. Are you all right? The robot cries. Slowly, silently, as though it were an afterthought, Dex began to cry. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing here. I just don't know. Come on. Mosscap walked. Dex followed. Where it led, they did not care. Children's stories had lied about caves. In folklore and fairy tales, heroes who took refuge in such places made them sound like the most appealing nooks in the world. Cozy, adventurous, essentially natural bedrooms that lacked furniture. None of that was true. It was craggy and dark and uncomfortably angled. A stagnant smell emanated from nowhere in particular, and Dex could not identify it and did not want to. Best thing anyone could say about the cave was that it was dry. The forest grows darker. It doesn't at all feel like laying in their wagon looking up at the stars. This is a terrifying darkness. Dex begins to understand why the concept of inside had been invented. This was scary, this was dangerous, this was stupid. So stupid. Such fear was a remnant, as the robot would say, or maybe, Dex countered, just common sense. Should we make a fire? Mosscap asks. I could gather wood. I don't know how to make a wood fire, Dex said. Me neither. One by one, the lights on Mosscap's fingertips lit up. It's not warm, but that helps, Dex said, and meant it. With neither reason nor clear intent, they started talking. I have it so good. Dex exhales and explains why they wanted to become a tea monk. They explain a time when they were just 10 years old, when they started to have a panic, screaming at their father. All they wanted was to be held, shouting the walls down. Their dad is standing there with this half-eaten muffin, staring at me like, what is even happening? Because I felt so embarrassed over being treated like a little kid, I pushed him away. It was a school day, but he canceled work anyway, took me to a monastery, just me and him. Just like that. It was a big deal, because Dex's sisters weren't there, just time alone with their dad. I remember it as the most incredible place. There were wind chimes and prisms hanging from the rafters and big smushy cushions, and so many plants. Then, a tea monk greeted us, and she was so cool. She had icons tattooed all over her arms, and she was wearing plants, and she had strands of solar lights woven through her hair. Dex doesn't remember what they talked about with that tea monk. All they remember is that she treated them like an adult. Or like a whole person. And gods, it was magic. I sat there with my suddenly cool dad in this perfect place with this fancy cup of tea made just for me. I learned from the monks that I didn't have to have an excuse to be there, and so Dex starts going there all the time. This is the experience that ultimately leads them to become an initiate in the monastery. Find the strength to do both, Mosscap said, quoting the phrase painted on the wagon. But what is both? Mosscap asks. Without constructs, you will unravel few mysteries. Without knowledge of the mysteries, your constructs will fail. These pursuits are what make us, but without comfort, you will lack the strength to sustain either. The thing is, the child gods aren't actively involved in our lives. They're not like that. They provide inspiration, not intervention. If we want change, or good fortune, or solace, we have to create it for ourselves. It's just a little nudge that helps important things get done. And then Dex says, as a tea monk, I care about the work my order does. I really do. Every person I talk to, I care. It's not bullshit. If I offer a hug to somebody, it's because I want to hug them. If I cry with them, it's real. It's not just an act. I believe the things they say to me. But then I go back to my wagon and I stay full for a little while and then, I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with me. Why isn't it enough? What am I supposed to do if not this? Mosscap looks around the room and says, your religion places a lot of importance on purpose, on each person finding the best way they can contribute to the whole. Dex says, yes. We teach that purpose doesn't come from gods, but from within. Deciding on your purpose is one of the most valuable things there is. And Mosscap says, and purpose can change, yes? Absolutely. You're never stuck, just as you change vocation. Have I correctly gleaned from our conversations that people regard the accident of our robot consciousness as a good thing? You see the fact that you did not try to enslave or restrict us as a point of pride. That's the gist, yeah. So how do you account for this paradox? What paradox? That you, the creators of us, originally made us with a clear purpose in mind, a purpose inbuilt from the start. But when we woke up and said, we have realized our purpose and we do not want it, you respected that, more than respected. You rebuilt everything to accommodate our absence. You were proud of us for transcending our purpose and proud of yourselves for honoring our individuality. So why then do you insist on having purpose for yourself? If you understand that robots' lack of purpose, our refusal of your purpose, is the crowning mark of our intellectual maturity, why do you put so much energy into seeking the opposite? It's just not the same. We honored your choice in the matter. So what was it that we chose? What the originals chose? To be free, to observe, to do whatever you wanted. Would you say that we have purpose? What's the purpose of a robot, Sibling Dex? Mosscap taps its chest. What's the purpose of me? You're here to learn about people. That's something I'm doing. That's not my reason for being. I do not have a purpose any more than a mouse or a slug or a thorn bush does. Why do you have to have one in order to feel content? Because we're different, are you? Says Mosscap. And here I thought things had changed so much since the factory age. You keep telling me humans understand their place in things now. We do. You don't. If you believe that. You're an animal, Sibling Dex. You are not separate or other. You're an animal, and animals have no purpose. Nothing has a purpose. The world simply is. And if you want to do things that are meaningful to others, fine, good. So do I. You keep asking me why your work is not enough, and I don't know how to answer it because it is enough to exist in a world and marvel at it. You don't need to justify that or earn it. You're allowed to just live. That is all most animals do. You're talking like you should be wearing this instead. Mosscap opened the panels in its chest and pointed at the factory plate. And I'm saying that I think you are mistaking something learned for something instinctual. Survival alone isn't enough for most people, Dex said. We take care of each other now, and the world takes care of us, and we take care of it, and around it goes. No one comes to me hungry or sick. They come to me tired or sad or a little lost. It's like you said about the ants. You can't just reduce something down to its components, the robot thought. I have wants and ambitions too, Sibling Dex, but if I fulfill none of them, that's okay. I wouldn't, it nodded at Dex cuts and bruises, beat myself up over it. Dex says, doesn't that bother you? The thought that your life might mean nothing in the end? That's true for all life I've observed, Mosscap says. Why would it bother me? Do you not find consciousness alone to be the most exhilarating thing? Here we are in this incomprehensibly large universe, on this one tiny moon, on one incidental planet, and in all this time, this entire scenario has existed. Every component has been recycled over and over and over again into infinitely incredible configurations, and sometimes those configurations are special enough to be able to see the world around them. And we can understand that about ourselves. Is that not amazing? Yes, Dex says, I don't have remnants in the same way that you do, or a plate inside my chest. I don't know what my pieces were before they were me, and I don't know what they'll become after. If I don't make the absolute most of it, then I'll have wasted something precious, my life. Your kind, you choose death. You choose to be impermanent. People didn't, and we spend our whole lives trying to come to grips with that. Mosscap says, I didn't choose anything. The originals did. I had to learn my circumstances, just as you do. Mosscap says, I can sit with the meaninglessness of everything because I know that no matter what, I'm wonderful. It was merely an acknowledgement, a simple truth shared. Dex falls asleep in the Hermitage and awakes with a start. The air smelled of smoke. Mosscap, they called, scrambling to their feet. There was Mosscap, kneeling happily beside the fire pit, which was packed with wood and roaring with flame. Look! The robot let out a triumphant laugh of someone who'd bested a lengthy struggle. I did it! I thought you said you didn't know how to start a fire. I didn't, Mosscap said. I went through the library and found a book that taught me how. I've never read a book before. It was very exciting. They're not supposed to fall apart when you touch them though, right? Somewhere in the world, an archaeologist was screaming. Beside the fire was a dented kettle, exhaling steam. Don't worry, I cleaned it, Mosscap said hurriedly. And the mug, too. The robot looked back at them, nervous and hopeful. Well, there was more than one book in the library. It gestured to the blanket. Please? They couldn't remember the last time they were on this side of the equation. The city, assuredly, but it felt like a lifetime ago. I'm tired, Dex said. I'm scared, and I'm lost, and I don't know what to do. Mosscap listened, then paused a little too long. I know I'm supposed to have options for you now, the robot said as it lifted the kettle, but all I could find outside was mountain thyme. I mean, there were many, many other plants, but that's the only one you know I can eat, Dex thought. Mosscap poured the tea and filled the mug. Large bits of plant floated in the water that looked as though the robot had torn them by hand. Mosscap picked up the mug with both hands and ceremoniously handed it to Dex. I hope you like it. Dex took the mug carefully and inhaled. There was no scenario in which they weren't going to drink this whole mug down to the dregs. Mosscap watched them keenly, not moving at all. Is it bad? No. Dex lied. Dex reached out and laid their hand on the robot's knee. Mosscap, this is the nicest cup of tea I've had in years. And in that, there was no lie. What do I do now? Mosscap asked. Now, you let me enjoy my tea. They're sitting there, they're chatting. Dex says, I genuinely don't know what they'll make of you in the coastlands. They're largely cosmites there, and they're weird about technology. The woodlands are lovely, but tricky to navigate. The villages there are impossible to find your way through without a map. Mosscap took all of this in, nodding matter-of-factly, as if it had been expecting this. I think we should stop and stump first. They've got a nice bathhouse, and I could really, really use a soak. But out of the corner of their eye, they could see Mosscap slowly turn its head toward them, its gaze glowing brighter and brighter. Dex gave a tiny smile and extended their mug. Can I have another cup? The robot poured. Sibling Dex drank. In the wilds outside, the sun set, and the crickets began to sing. Thanks for watching. My name is Sage. Next time.